Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us for the ANA eLearning Academy. This is our last presentation of 2020, so thanks so much for joining us. Today we have Dennis doing a presentation on researching and publishing a numismatic book, so I hope you enjoy that. During your presentation today, if you have any questions, you will have to use the chat feature or the Q&A feature here in Zoom. The questions will come to me, and then I'll read those aloud to Dennis at the end of the presentation. I will be launching a survey at the end of the presentation as well, so feel free to fill that out for us to help us with further classes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dennis. Enjoy.
Oh, I'm going to talk a little bit about research and publishing a numismatic book, and a lot of it was learning along the way, and I'll go ahead and get started. The first slide basically says that I've done two books. One of them is a CD book, and it's Chattanooga Money, and that was primarily Tom Carson and I's personal collection because we collected Chattanooga money of various types. Now, we didn't all collect all of it, but between the two of us, we collected most of it. And the second part, and then the longer part, will be my Tennessee obsolete paper money book, which is a 528-page printed book, 8.5 by 11, and I'll show you some typical slides later on in the presentation. We'll end with where are we going to go from here? Because, you know, you're always doing the next thing along the list, and we're already into that at this point. Chattanooga Money, we started out doing research primarily in the city of Chattanooga, where we both live, and did some historical societies and museums in Nashville and several other places. And then we created images from our own collections, and then also did from other collectors. I'll get into that more as we get along. We also picked up images from catalogs and from other museums and so on. It includes all the obsolete notes from the city of Chattanooga. It includes depression script, merchant script, railroad script, coupons, certificates, ad notes, national bank notes, bank checks, tokens, medals, and badges. And it also collects, we had an error section. We had about 1,000 different color images in that CD book, and we sold the CD book. During, I guess, the first book we started actually publishing and selling in 2003, and by 2005 we had pretty much saturated the market for those people that wanted a CD book of this type. And we sold 69 CDs, and net cost was like $350 for the 69 CDs as published. And net earnings, we made a profit of about $400. So it's the inexpensive way to go. Lack of a printed book did limit sales. We had a number of people said they would love to have a book and they wanted us to do one. After 2005, when we basically put that CD images and book on my website, you'll see at the bottom in blue, you can go to there and you can see exactly is in the Chattanooga Money book. And it is specifically a small area, but it goes back to about probably the early 1800s. Most of it starts about the Civil War or a little before, the 1840s. The techniques we used for Tennessee, I'm switching now to the second book. The techniques were used for the Tennessee obsolete money book, and we did very many of the same kinds of research, only now all of a sudden we were doing not just Chattanooga and not just our own collections, but the whole state. And Tom collected some obsolete notes from various mining and companies from across the state, but I didn't collect too much stuff from across the state. I really focused on Chattanooga. I might mention that Tom has probably been collecting Chattanooga material, numismatic material, from probably somewhere in the 1970s. I know in 1990 he went to the New York Christie's sale and bought a bunch of proof notes from Chattanooga. One of the things we thought we were going to do right at first was there was a book called that Paul Garland wrote on, and it was part of the SPMC, and I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you can read it. I can't read it good because but anyway, it's the name of it is A History of Early Tennessee Banks and Their Issues. And it's a book that's about, this is my book, and it's about wore out because I make all kinds of notes in my book. And I did that as I did my later book on the whole state too. And one of the things that we're going to do was we were going to just do a supplement to Paul Garland's book, which was primarily state authorized banknotes. And I was at a coin club meeting locally, and one of the older gentlemen there said, well, I understand you're doing a book on some scrip, because that was our original intent, is just do script and let Paul Garland's book stay as the banknote book. And he said he had some Xerox copies of a guy by the name of Charlie Sedman's collection. And Sedman had collected script from the state of Tennessee and had 279 pieces of script, but they were Xerox copies because it was back quite a ways, a number of years ago, and he didn't have any other way to make copies of them. And some of them were not real great copies too. But in any case, that was a start because it at least told us what was out there and what was, and a bunch of it came out in auctions later on because he sold his collection to the Shingos, and those pieces were auctioned out in about 18 auctions, about 30,000 notes or so they had over a period of about 10 years. We had a good friend of ours that was Bill Sharp that was from Memphis, and we would go down to the Memphis Paper Money show all the time, and Tom and I would. And Bill was after us to include an updated version of all the banknotes from Tennessee because he was collecting the whole state. He was also a paper money dealer and did obsoletes for all of the South and many other areas. And so he sent me and tried to encourage me to the CDs for all of his information where he had scanned each note at 300 DPI and put down comments about those notes, what he knew about them, who they authorized them, and what bank it was from, what date was on this particular note, et cetera, et cetera. And so we decided after some talking, Tom and I, that we would do the whole state of Tennessee and do all obsolete notes. One of the other things we did, we're constantly going to shows around this area of the country, and some of them in farther away from the country. But anyway, we were going to shows to buy our collections and talk to dealers, etc. And we were meeting a lot of other collectors who collected Tennessee paper money. And we decided to set up a get-together of all the people that collected Tennessee paper money. And we would meet at various cities around the state of Tennessee, mostly in the east and central part of the state. And we would pull in people from Kentucky sometimes, and some from Georgia, and some from North Carolina that collected it. And we would go someplace for lunch, and then we'd go to a secure place where we could bring, each of us could bring a piece of their collection and then lay it out on a table and talk through what it was and what it showed and why he had this and not that and so on. And then I would take my scanner to the meeting, and after the meeting, I would get with various people there to scan their notes for images for our book. The other thing we did to try to make sure people were okay with that is we allowed them to not only give us images and information, but we were going to identify who gave us that information or who gave us that image. Website, I had taken, when I retired, I took a course in web building and started putting notes up from, well, I actually started back for the Chattanooga book. And so we set up another area for just the collectors and the dealers who were giving us all this information so they could see that something was happening and that their name was attached to it. And they would then come back and say, oh, I got a better one of those than the one that's on the website. And he'd send that person would send a new piece of information, new image or something, and I'd replace it and put a new person in there because we were trying to get the best notes we had to show. Because with paper money, as most of you probably know, it doesn't hold up real well. What was included in the book? Well, we didn't include everything, but we tried to include a lot of things, and that's listing there is what we included, said we would include, mainly banknotes, proof notes, post notes, which means a note that is paid off later, counterfeit notes, spurious notes, raised notes where they took a dollar bill and raised it up to a $10 bill and then tried to pass it, saving bank notes, certificates of deposit, private bank notes. There was at least one private bank that never was authorized by the state until it had already been in business for about 10 years or so. Merchant script, railroad script, and in railroad script we included every railroad that ran through the state of Tennessee. So it might be a Georgia railroad or it might be a North Carolina railroad, but if it ran through Tennessee, we included it we had images of the pieces that were put out and so on. It also included Tennessee city script. Chattanooga had a bunch of city script, and Tennessee state warrants that were put out right after the Civil War to pay off some of the debts of the Civil War, and county script, and what's called pre-denominated checks. It's not a check, but it comes out printed with a denomination on it. And if it's a 25-cent note, it gets passed as a 25-cent note, and you can take it to the bank, and they'd take it out of your bank account, just like a check. But whoever took it to the bank and gave it to the bank would get his whatever it was good for. We also included what I'll call crossover state notes, because many times you have a note that's authorized and payable in a different state or a different place. Much of it, if you had a Tennessee, we put a Tennessee note in the book that was authorized to be issued in Tennessee, but it might be payable in North Carolina, or it might be payable in Kentucky or something like that. Or many of the states that were around, Tennessee is a very old state, and so many of the states around it were not, except the original 13, were not adjacent to us. So when Alabama started being a territory, they made their notes payable in Tennessee. That's a crossover anyway. One of the things that I thought was really important is to have a identification system, a shorthand for the material that we're going to put out and put in the book. And so this state identification system included all of the things below there: denomination, the description, the date, the Garland number, which is Paul Garland's book number, the Haxby number, which is a book of all the U.S. company, all the banknotes from the U.S. Other state reference books were used. Typically, there was one recently that I was talking to somebody about that was issued out of Eufaula, Alabama, and the guy actually floated it and paid for it in Chattanooga because he was a cotton merchant before the Civil War, and he would bring his cotton all the people around him's cotton up to the river, the Tennessee River, and float it down the river and to New Orleans and then back to Europe or wherever it was going, the cotton. Anyway, those notes were actually a typical note. And so I would include the state book number in our description write-up. Signatures were put down if it affects the actual issuer. Recent selling prices, I did for about 10 or 15 years, I kept track of all the Tennessee notes and what they were paid, what they brought at auction or on eBay or in a private sale, and put that down into a big spreadsheet and kept track of it, so that when the book came out, or a few years before a book came out, I put in all the numbers, and we put down recent selling prices and who sold it, and the rarity. And we used a system of 1 was very common and 16 was basically, we know there was a note like that issued. We don't have an image. We don't even think that it might have survived. SENC is a Haxby shorthand for surviving example not confirmed. In other words, it's a note that is in some record someplace back during the time these notes were in circulation, and it was described, but nobody thinks that it ever survived, or there might be one shows up. We would put down the price in 2 grades. Generally, I use very good and very fine, but if it was a note that was very poor all the time, all the notes were real poor, I would shift what grades I was going to give you a price, because there's no sense giving them a price when the best grade is good. So I would shift it, but most of them have very good and very fine. Now here's some examples of what this state identification number is. The place ID, we use the shorthand C for Chattanooga, BB for Big Bottom, CA for Callahan, and etc. So for every city that issued some kind of obsolete currency, it came from a specific city. And we would use that as the first part of the example. Here, the one up at the top, it's in dark, that says this is from Chattanooga. The B says that it's a bank as opposed to a merchant script or a government script or a railroad script. Issuing name, we would just use a shorthand 2 to 3 characters for, like we had a note issued by Abernathy, and so we use the shorthand of ABE in this example right here. Alabama, ALA would be for the Alabama Railroad and Chattanooga Railroad. ETN would be East Tennessee Bank. It would include the denomination. This one up here is a 25-cent note. I would, for something less than $1, I'd use the just 25C, or even like it was 33 1/3, and there's one of them in the book that's that denomination. I just put 33C. For anything greater than $1, you'd put $1. Now, occasionally we'd run against one that was $1.50 or some figure like that. So I put it down as a 125C, $1.25. And for a type number, generally speaking, if it's the particular note we're talking about is the only type known, then it doesn't have a type number. One is implied. But if there are 2 or 3 type numbers, you put type 1, type 2, type 3. And in the book, you'd have a description that would tell you how they're different. Then you had a subtype, A, B, C, etc. Then you put down a general class of money. And there's UN means unissued. If there isn't any, it's a regular banknote, there's no, or it's blank. PN stands for a post note, one that was not payable till sometime in the future. CF for counterfeit, proof, PF for proof. Now, these are just 1 or 2 different ones that I've used just to give you an idea how it works, but there's a whole, in the book, there's a listing of all of these things and what ones are valid. And then we're having to, as we find new notes, we have to come up with new ways. And that's kind of what the next slide's. Here's a typical page in the book. And I'll hold the book up just so you can see the outside of it. It's a great big thick book, 500 plus pages, hardbound, and I'll show you more of the pages in the back, but just to give you an idea what we did. Oops, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Up at the top, it lists what bank it was or what city it came from. And it was from Nashville. It was the parent bank. And this is a issued note. You can see the signatures right here. This is the proof note. Oh, actually, I'll take that back. Okay, this is an issued note. How do we know? Okay, I see. This is one that's kind of unusual. It's an issued note, but it's printed signatures. Normally, this period of time, they were handwritten signatures, and the proof note wouldn't have any signature on it. But you can tell it's a proof note because it's got holes punched where the signature would have gone. This is the ID I just talked about. Here's a little bit about what was on the bill. The Garland numbers I talked about, which was state book. The Haxby number. Who was complimentary of this image? The image was from R.M. Smith, auction so-and-so, lot so-and-so, a certain date, and it was fine condition. That's this one. And it sold for $422. And then there's also one that was from the Smythe issue that was this proof note. And then we later changed it to a different guy's proof note because he had a better proof note. And it was from Mike Talent. The bottom part here, this box, lists for you the type. This is the type for the issued note. This is the type for the proof note. The rarity is that rarity number runs from 1 to 15, which is number 1 note known. And 16 means we don't think there is one left. We don't know about one that even exists. Then the prices are here for very good and very fine on this note, and $12.50 for the proof note. Sometimes we didn't have an image. One of the things that was done back when these notes were put into circulation was that you had people that would try to counterfeit them. And so there were books put out or pamphlets put out in large cities in the East that would say, this note is a counterfeit, and they'd show you an image, or they'd say, this one has this description on it, and this is the one that's the real one. So sometimes we knew what it looked like from this description, but I don't have an image of it. Now, this one was rated as an R12, which is probably about a dozen notes known, but I haven't found one in 16 years. By the way, we took 16 years to go till we published it, from 2003 on up. And this is a proof note. You can see the holes. This one, you can see the holes. It's also a proof note. I don't know if there are any actual issued notes. There's still a lot of them to come out. And in fact, we published this thing in July of last year. And since then, I have found 20 more notes that aren't in the book. So we knew that would be the case, not because you just never see them all. Oops, where I went the wrong way. No, I didn't. Okay, I was just giving it, I was trying to remember where I was. This state of identification number is what I call an open system, meaning it's not just a sequential number through the book. Paul Garland's book on Tennessee books starts with ID number 1 and it goes to 1400 and something. And if you find one that belongs in the middle of the book, you can't identify, you can't put a number down. So I call it an open system where it'll work. If there's a new city discovered, you just give it a new code for that city. If there's a new denomination, same thing. If you wanted to add something, depression script is not in this book, but if you wanted to add it at some time in the future, all you do is put down something like DP for the type of note it is. One of the things I was saying earlier, if you come up with a $2.50 note, and there is a railroad note that they issued for $2.50, I don't know why, but anyway, I put it down in the book as 250C. Okay, so you got to make the translation. Especially, I think I mentioned 33 1/3 cent note. I put it down as a 33 because the fractions are just not worth messing with right now in the ID system. There have been several new issuers that have issued since that we found since the book was published, and that's not unusual for this kind of thing. One of the things I want to talk about a little bit is if you're going to do a book, or you're thinking about doing it, you're going to need some software. The software we use for the CD book was somewhat minimum. We use Dreamweaver, which is a program for developing websites. In both cases, both books we did, we had a website. And when we got ready to sell the books, both of them, we took the website down and then we sold the book or the CD. Photoshop was used for editing images. A lot of times you get images that are not too good and somebody's got a whole sheet of paper there and you need to cut it down to size or that kind of thing. So you use that. Now for the written book, I used Adobe InDesign for layout of the book, and I'll talk more about what it can do. But that is the standard for all magazines, newspapers, books in the world right now. It used to be a Mac program, but it no longer is. If you're going to get these programs, the last one was Adobe Acrobat. The InDesign actually creates an Adobe Acrobat publication thing that you take to the printer and he prints it. Training, I took some training in Adobe Dreamweaver, one semester, 3 hours a week kind of thing, at a local college right after I retired. And that's why I set up the websites how I did. Photoshop I had used previously in scanning images and that kind of thing for my own collection. But it's probably the standard for identifying and changing images. InDesign, I really struggled with that, and it probably took up a year or two before I got it to the point where it was doing the right thing. And I tried to learn by picking up books and reading them and doing it, and it's very complicated. And I really needed some classes, and I tried to find some, but the problem is it's so specialized that there's not much call for people getting trained in it. You get a person that knows Adobe Acrobat, Adobe InDesign, and their whole career, that's what they do. And so you don't need to replace them, you only need one. But each printer needs one. So there are some classes, but I just couldn't get any right then. And one of the things I would recommend if you ever get into that program is find a consultant. And I had some consultants, but I needed some more. And Adobe Acrobat is about a 3-hour class. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that people knew is, why do you use that Adobe InDesign? And this program really utilizes, as I said a minute ago, all of the printers, books, newspapers, magazines. It automatically creates a table of contents. It creates header page contents, an index, and it does it by using specific, you define a font you want to have for the city name, for example. And when you type that into the program and identify it, you identify it with a specific font that's got a certain, it's bold or it's not bold, it's italic, it's one font or another font, it's got, whatever. There's a bunch of things you specify for that particular thing. And when you type that in and then assign that specific font to it, it then knows to put it in either the index or in the table of contents. And I'll show you some in a little bit. One of the things, my lack of knowledge in using InDesign required extra work and cost for the printer to modify the book. I had the essence of it. I had what I needed from how to do it and what it was going to look like, but there were some things that I didn't know that I had to go back and change the font, how the book was laid out. The alternative of that, and a lot of people use it, is Microsoft Word. The only thing I would recommend if you do Microsoft Word is keep separate files for each chapter or each section. I've had experience with using Word, and sometimes it gets messed up when it shouldn't, and you lose work that you have to go back and fix. But that's only big, long sections of it. As long as you keep your sections reasonably small, then, or your chapters, whatever it is, it works good. It doesn't have all these things about working for index. You have to do it manually, or contents. Oops, too much. Let me think, where are we? Okay, right there. Whoops, why am I there? Got stuff here. Hold fire. I hit the, okay, sure, there we go. Okay, we printed 250 books And we did those last July. They came off and got shipped to Tom and I, Tom Carson. And we set the selling price at $110 because that's what that would break even for us. And it's a pretty high price for a book, but that's what it costs, especially when you're only doing 250 books. If you're going to do a book that a lot of people will buy, you can bring that price way on down because the setup and so on is a large part of that price. If you're writing a book for, on, say, Confederate currency, a lot of people in the United States do Confederate currency, so a lot of people would buy the book, and therefore you can run the price way down on the price per book, and you can make a profit. Well, we said 110, and so Tom and I, in order to not sell it less than that, are selling all the books personally ourselves, because if you're going to give it to a bookseller, he's going to want it for 60% of what you're selling for personally. So if it's 110 for me to send it, and that's what it costs, then I'd have to send it to a bookseller for 60% of 110, or somewhere around $70, and which means I'd lose money. Future-wise, as I told you, we are continuing to find notes, especially script notes, that are new things and are not in the book. So what I'm doing as we continue this is I've put them in the software for the book and put in a new image and a price and what have you, and a description. And we plan to, when we have sold all of the regular books, we will create a CD book and create it. We just take this InDesign software and print out a Adobe Acrobat file and then put that file on a CD. A lot of people, I've actually had several people ask me for a CD thing because they can carry it around with them, carry their PC with them, or they can even potentially put it on Dropbox or something like that that's on and see, we'll look at it on their phone. So that's kind of where we're going next on this. I told you I'd give you an idea of what things it did, and I just grabbed out a few pieces of this is a typical example of the table of contents. That table of contents is 13 pages long, and it lists every piece of script and every bank from every different branch in the table of contents. So you can go right through it and find out in the table of contents where you want to go. That's this area here. If you also have a table of contents, this allows up to 5 different kinds of table of contents. There's an overall book catalog, and this is a catalog just of the introduction to the book and how to use it. So it has preface and acknowledgments and rarity and identification system and bibliography and so on. I talked about the index. This is kind of a typical index thing. As I said earlier, when you put down Agricultural Bank at Columbia, and then assign that font that knows it ought to go to the index, it puts it in the index and it puts the page number on it. If you go back later and add in a page, it automatically corrects it. So that's pretty powerful, at least for doing it once you get sure about it. Okay, I want to put it back on that page. I'm kind of done with my, and I've got done faster than I thought I would, but at least I got some time for questions if you have any.
We have a couple that have come in.
Okay.
I'm going to actually launch the survey while we are talking. So if those that are still on the presentation with us, please do the survey while you're listening in. Okay, so let's see here. Were the books printed on demand or in one lot? Can the
One lot.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. One lot? Okay. And then the next question with that, can the CD book be set up so buyers can go into an office supply store and print it up from a book?
Come and try me again on that one.
Okay. Can the CD book be set up so buyers can go to an office supply store and print up a book from it?
Let me think about that a minute. I don't think so. I'm not sure about that. If you put it in Adobe Acrobat, which is what we did with the first book, I guess you could print from it on your personal computer, but I don't think you could take it in, because what you have, each CD you put on a different password, and I did on the Chattanooga book. And the person that bought that got that password. Now he could go to his someplace and print it, I guess. You could go to a place and print it, but that would be, in general, you can't do that. You'd have to have the password. You couldn't just hand it to somebody unless you told them what the password was.
It says, can you explain the R number once more? I did not understand the 1 to 15 or 16 meaning.
Okay. In the book, and I didn't show a picture of it, but I'll just pull my book out and run through it. It's got a table in the front of the book under how to use the book, and it lists the R numbers and how many notes there are for that particular one. Okay, Rarity. I don't think I'm going to let you try to read it. I don't think that'd come out good. This one starts with a 16. None have ever been seen. Okay. R15, there is one note known. R14, there are two notes known. R13 is 3 to 5. R12 is 6 to 10. R11 is 11 to 20. R10 is 21 to 50. R9 is 51 to 100. R8 is 101 to 200. R7 is 201 to 500. And R6 is 501 to 1,000. Well, it keeps going down like that to where if you've got an R1, it says more than 100,000 of them. Okay. Now that you have it, most books have a rarity number, and they aren't all the same. So that's why you have to put it in the front of the book. And this is applicable for paper money that tends to be fairly scarce. Just to give you an example, R1 on this scale is just like a 1909 SVBD. There's more than 100,000 of them. And that's where it stops, because there aren't any notes that there's 100,000 of that particular note. Even a 1913 nickel there's 5 of them. And so that's an R13. So this scale is skewed towards something that there aren't very many of them. You write another book on Lincoln cents, you're going to have a totally different R system. Did that help you?
Hopefully, we'll see what they say. All right, we'll move on to the next one. What is the advantage of publishing the book over posting your research on a website?
You can publish it on the website. By the way, I guess I may have missed that when I went through. Our current Chattanooga Money is on my website. and it's open to public. If you put it on the website, it's pretty much open to anybody, and why would they pay for it?
There we go. All right. How are you promoting your book?
How am I promoting it? That's a good question, because with this current pandemic, I'm not promoting it very well. I used advertising. I've got advertising at some of the numismatic magazines. I've got advertising on my website. I've got advertising in several articles I've written for some of the numismatic books, like on paper money and that kind of thing. I also go to a lot of shows, not too many this year, but I previously went to a lot of shows, and I would have a table, or I would have just walk around and see what people are needing a Tennessee book, and I'd show it to them and they'd buy it or not. So a personal one-on-one kind of thing. We sold about 76 of our 225 books so far. And like I said, we started in July last year.
Wow, that's great. Did you have a hard time finding a publisher? How did you find one?
I used a publisher here in Chattanooga, Adams. Adams Lithography Company in Chattanooga. I knew him. Several other people knew him that done them. He did an excellent job. It probably wasn't the cheapest one in town. A lot of times you can get books published in China a whole lot cheaper. One of the things that drove us to do one that's local is that he would do work with a small lot. 250 books is not hardly worth messing with for publishers.
All right. Why not use the print on demand service to print books to save money?
Why not? I considered that, but one of the things that you need to look at closely, and I did and decided not to use, was that you give the rights to that book to that company. And if I want to now, if I'm planning on doing a CD book later, I don't have the right to do that. So if you're going to do something that's got multiple listings, a lot of your numismatic books are you put out every so often, new editions. So if you have a print on demand, which I'm aware of it, and I have some books on my shelf that are done that way, but you basically lose control of your book once you do that. Okay.
As PCs have gotten small, we have lost the CD drive. Have you put the CD books on a cloud?
I use Dropbox for moving large files or for backing them up. I have a USB drive on my PC. I have a CD drive that plugs into my USB. You're right, they've gone away. Now, the problem is that the size of this InDesign book would not fit on a CD. You're going to have to reduce the image size. The image size in this book is 300 DPI for the images in the notes, and you've got probably 3,000 books and 3,000 images.
All right.
I don't know if I answered that question. I guess you can use a cloud, and I do have Dropbox where I use a cloud, and I use that to transfer files back and forth. When I was working with the publisher, she would send me a copy of a section, and I'd review it and mark it up and send it back to her via Dropbox.
All right. Any thoughts on using Microsoft Publisher? It works much better than Word.
I haven't used Microsoft Publisher, so I really can't comment on it. All I can tell you is the standard for the industry is this InDesign, but it's not easy.
How much do you think the CD version will sell for?
Probably, if my thought would be that I would give the software to somebody for a fairly small amount, maybe $25. But then I would every time I'd put another one out in another 2 years with a lot more book things in it or updated prices, and sell it for $25 for that. I don't know. I don't know what I'd sell it for, but it doesn't cost you. It costs you about $4, $5 to do a CD with the CD and the thing you put it in, the plastic and so on. But you're right. The CD, you really almost have to do it nowadays on a flash drive.
Perfect. If I buy the book, how can I get new discoveries to include with my printed book?
Our plan is basically to sell all the books before we initiate upgrades. Because if we did, I'm putting it into the original book electronic, so I wouldn't be given just the pieces. So they're going to have to wait for the next one, next issue.
All right. What is your website address and email address, if you're willing to give that out?
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm going to close. You don't want me to identify it. Let me see. I've got it on a slide. Well, where's it go? Okay, let's go through it slower. There it is, on the bottom there. Schafluetzel.org. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. By the way, there's other things that are on that website that deal with, like I said, Chattanooga Money is there. There's one on Western Atlantic Railroad, etc. There's a number of different numismatic things on that site. It also gives more information about how do you get a book.
Perfect. You may have just spoken on this. Can you suggest a publishing company to publish a book?
What?
Can you suggest a publishing company to publish a book?
I don't know. I don't really have a thing there. I specifically didn't shop around. We went with a local company, and I know that you can, like I said, there are numerous different companies, but I don't know too much about them.
Perfect. And the last question that's come in so far, it said, do the books sell to private individuals, or only have they gone to organizations such as libraries and museums to buy them? If not, would you like to sell them? If so, did you approach them or did they approach you?
Okay. We have been selling books to dealers, to individuals, and for the period, and generally, and I've got something on my website that tells you how to do that, how to get a hold of myself or Tom Carson, and we'll ship it to them. If I'm at a show, I don't, there's no, it costs about $10 to send one, but if I'm at a show, I will have books with me. And the other part of the question was, what was that? I've forgotten.
If you didn't sell them to organizations, would you like to sell them? And if you did you approach them or did they approach you?
In all cases, we approached them. Now, we did give away to start with as advertising I sent one to the ANA, and I sent one to the Society of Paper Money Collectors. I wrote an article for several different ones, and I gave them, for the people that took advertising, which I didn't tell you about, but in the back of the book, one way you make a little bit of money is by putting an advertising thing in the back of the book or somewhere in the book. I will hold something up so you can see it. Okay. Those are ads at the end of the book, and anybody that took a full page ad got a free book.
Perfect. All right, we have time for a few more. How long do you anticipate it will take to sell 250 copies?
Well, the reason I said we're going to do 250 is because the Paul Garland book, this one that I had earlier talked about, that was written in the early 80s, he died before he sold them all. And I'd say he worked at it for 20 years. So he made 1,000 of them, we believe. Okay, so that's why we cut it back to 250. Now, the question is, how long will it take me? I would say that it's going to be a couple of years because I probably lost this past year, because I haven't been to any shows and I don't even get to go to any meetings hardly.
Perfect. All right, we'll do a few more. Let's see here. How much did you sell the ads for?
Full page, I think I did $850. And then I did half pages and quarter pages for somewhat less, obviously.
Awesome. All right, this will be our last for today. Will you and Tom autograph books that you mail out?
Yes, I always do. And if you buy it from from Tom or I, now we don't normally ship them back and forth because I'm here in Chattanooga and he's now up in Kingston, and then the other half of the year in the summer I'm up in Colorado. So we don't ship books back and forth to get them signed. But we're happy to do that. I'm sure he does, and I always sign them and personalize it to a person or an organization.
Perfect. All right. So we are at time. I want to thank you, Dennis, for your time today, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot. Our next presentations won't be until mid-January, so hopefully you can jump on there. If you haven't seen recently, we have taken the prices off of our paid classes for January, so everything is now free. So jump on there, get signed up for all of those. And hopefully everybody has a great holiday season, and we'll see everybody in 2021. Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.